Good morning, friends. I am Professor Vidyadharsh Sagar. Today we are going to see lecture number 1 on manufacturing process subject. In this subject, we are going to see the unit number 1, metal casting process. So let's start the unit number 1, metal casting process. In introduction, the casting is a manufacturing process by which a molten material such as metal or plastic is introduced into the mold and allowed to solidify within the mold ejected or broken out to make a fabricated part. So in casting mold, we need to pour the molten metal, and when we break down the mold cavity which is made up of the casting sand, then we will get the final product as a fabricated part. So casting is used for making the part of the complex shape. That casting part in which the part get need not to be assembled, that would be difficult or uneconomical to make other methods like joining two metal parts, such as cutting from the solid materials also. So casting may be used for the hot liquid metals or meltable plastics called the thermoplastics, or the various material that cold set after the mixing, or components such as a certain plastic resins such as epoxy, water, or the setting material. So the casting is not only the limited to the metals, it also be applicable for the different type of the polymer materials also, like the plastics or the thermoplastic material. Then the substitution is always a factor in which deciding whether other technique use you insist of the casting also applicable. Now let's see what are the different fundamentals of the casting. So basically there are six basic factors involved in the casting process. First of all, we need to be prepared a mold cavity. Right? That mold cavity allows us to give the shape to our mold, that fabricated part. Then that we call it as a casting. Then next is a melting process. Metal should have to be melt down in such a way that the metal can be easily poured inside the mold cavity, and the metal having a good flyability to get the shape of this mold cavity. Then the pouring technique, that pouring technique should have to be considered. In the pouring technique, we should have to be considered there are different factors of preparing the mold cavity, like pouring basin, spur, then runner, and the gating system. In later lectures, we will going to be learn about the different pouring techniques and what are the different factors need to be considered for the pouring techniques. Then the solidification process. So how much time will take to be solidify, and how the solidification is going to be taking place when the casting is going on after the pouring a molten metal into the mold cavity. That also be very important basic factor of the casting process. Then the part removal after the ejecting mold or breaking the mold cavity, after the solidification of the molten metal get filled up inside the mold cavity, that part get removed. So this process also are very critical, and that process also we need to be carried out with very carefully to avoid the damage of the casted part. Then the post processing is also very important in the casting process, that the extra parts or the extra material which is being attached on the fabricated part of the casting, that need to be removed or to be finished, that comes under the post processing processes. Casting terms like pattern is we called as a replica of the part, that part we will going to be manufactured of the casting. Then the flask which comes under the category which is used to be filled with the mold casting sand or the molding sand. Then the cope is the upper box and drag is the lower box. Then the core, basically core is used to make the casting hollow. Then the core box need to be prepared for special arrangement for keeping the core, that we called as core box. Then the core print, that core print need to be taken for preparing the core with the different material. Then the mold cavity, that mold cavity we prepared by removing the pattern from the molding sand, and we finally we get the hollow portion inside the cope box and track box filled with the casting sand that we called as a mold cavity. Then the riser is allows to make the risen of the extra metal after the filling the mold cavity. Then the gating system allow to run the molten metal inside the mold cavity. Then the pouring cup allows to make easy to pour the molten metal inside the mold cavity. At, from the pouring cup, that molten metal is passes through the spur, that tapered portion below the pouring cup or pouring basin. Then after the from pouring basin, the molten metal get moves towards the runner, and runner get passes this molten metal or give the pathway towards the gate, and gate is finally is the entry of the mold cavity, where the molten metal get enter and take the shape of the exact fabricated part. Then the parting line in between the cope and rack box, we call it as a parting line. And draft we need to give for the mold cavity in such a way that the final product of the fabricated part get removed easily from the mold cavity. So that's all about the today's lecture. Thank you very much. In next lecture, we're going to be see the next topic of this particular unit. Thank you very much.